Indonesia and Australia has formed a harmonious relation for a long time. Australia was one of the countries that supported Indonesia independence and opened the formal relations right after the Declaration of Independence in August 1945. Since then, the relation has continued and develops in various sectors, including economics, security and defense, maritime, social and culture, and not less important is people-to-people links. But like other relationships between neighboring countries, the connection between the two nations has not always been smooth. Tension occurred. But that did not stop the efforts to improve the cooperation to reach mutual benefits for the two nations and the region. I'm Purwani Diah Prabandari, and you are watching Tempo Talk. Today, we have a special guest, the most competent person to explain the relationship between Australia and Indonesia, Ibu Penny Williams. She is not only the ambassador of Australia to Indonesia, but she is the first Australian woman ambassador to Indonesia. She was also the first Australian global ambassador for women and girls in 2011-2013. It's the perfect time to have Ibu Penny Williams here during the celebration of International Women's Day. Ibu Williams, it's an honor to have you here at Tempo Talks.
Thank you so much, Nudari. I'm so pleased to be able to welcome you, especially on the occasion of International Women's Day.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Exactly.
Thank
A
you.
time to celebrate for all of us in Australia and Indonesia. So it's lovely to be able to talk to you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I remember last year in your tweet after you presented credential to the president, right? At the time, you wrote, "As Australia's first woman ambassador to the Republic of Indonesia, I'm looking forward to working with the government and people of Indonesia to further our close ties." Was there any reason why you put that to emphasize about the first female or the first woman ambassador to Indonesia?
I think firsts are important and they are something that we need to celebrate. But can I say, I'm just so proud to be Australia's ambassador to Indonesia. This is our biggest embassy in our whole network. It's a hugely important and consequential relationship, and we work together across so many areas, as you've said. So I'm just proud to be ambassador. But I'm also proud because actually 40 years ago, I was an exchange student here. And I was at SMA, Class 2, and I actually lived very close to where we're sitting today and lived with an Indonesian
So what
family.
SMA?
SMA 1 PSKD.
Okay.
So I was just very proud to be appointed ambassador. Very happy to be coming back full circle, like pulang kampung after 40 years as ambassador is something, just an incredible feeling. But being a first is important. As somebody who's worked on gender equality issues, as you said, as ambassador's first ambassador for women and girls, but also personally, I think it is important we celebrate women's first, and I think it is something to note that this is one of our most important embassies, and I am a woman appointee. But I think the most important is that I'm not the last. And I think it's really important for all of us as we sit here on the eve of International Women's Day to think about how do we, as women, particularly women leaders, inspire, support, mentor younger women. And I think that I do have a role to play as a role model. We often say, you can't be what you can't see. And it's quite important for younger women to be able to see what other women's career paths have been and that they've reached senior positions, and then for us to pull them along with us. So I'm very proud personally, but I also hope that I'm able to demonstrate that women can be appointed to the most important diplomatic roles.
Is it really difficult for women to get that position in Australia, especially in the foreign ministry?
So we've worked really hard at changing that within the ministry. There's definitely a sense that our foreign ministry and our diplomatic representatives have to represent Australia as we are today? What is contemporary Australia? So we're women, we're Indigenous, we're people of Asian origin, we're people of Muslim background, we're a multicultural society. So our foreign service needs to reflect that. The person I report to directly in Canberra, his name is Ridwan Jadwat. He's a Muslim guy whose parents came from South Africa. That's who we are, and our foreign service needs to represent that. That's hasn't always been a straight path, but I think over recent years we've really made an effort. It requires the business case, it requires conversations, it requires people to think about it and to set targets sometimes. I don't mean quotas, but to set targets. We actually have a lot of pictures of our first ambassadors who were women in our foreign ministry. When you walk in, you see the row of the photos of the first women ambassadors to every country. And then we have some mirrors, and the mirrors are where we haven't yet appointed women ambassadors. So that all women can look in that mirror and say, maybe that could be me one day. To be inspired. Yeah. So lots of things like that to kind of encourage women to think that they're capable to apply for these things. There's a lot of effort that goes into changing women's perceptions of themselves, cultural perceptions within our own system of whether people can perform at that level. So I think it's been a work in progress, but I'm pleased that now around 50% of our ambassadors are women.
Wow.
So across all sorts of
including
countries,
in the big countries,
including
in
the important countries.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But do you have any special mission or targets on the woman issue as the ambassador in Indonesia?
So the embassy here has had a long program of cooperation with Indonesia in gender equality. So it doesn't take a woman to come to change that, but perhaps I can drive it a little more, or be the face of it a little bit more, or bring it into the spotlight. Indonesia and Australia work really closely together on issues around gender equality. Internationally, we work together in international bodies. In regional bodies, we work together. But we also work together on bilateral issues. And what I would say is that, and this comes from my experience when I was ambassador for women and girls, the conversations that countries have around gender equality are not a conversation where you say, we have the answer, we'll tell you how to do it, because we don't have the answer. Everyone is dealing with the complexities of how you manage gender inequalities and what that means for women individually and what that means for women in society. So I think it's a conversation between partners about the challenges that we face and how we can work together to solve those challenges for our region and globally. But I should say that in our development partnership with Indonesia, which is a very strong partnership, we work really closely on gender equality across all sectors. I mean, when I think of some of the projects that we're doing, they're on women's economic empowerment. We're doing something in West Aceh with women who use water hyacinths to make crafts that they then sell not just in Jakarta but internationally.
Wow.
We're working with UNICEF in terms of response to, and the Ministry of Health, response to COVID and being able to engage women and children. But we work at a policy level as well. I think 2019 we did a fantastic short scholarship awards for a group of civil servants on mainstreaming gender in the public sector, and we'll repeat that again this year. So I think there's a lot of interest in what we're able to do together, and certainly our development partnership is really focused on gender equality and inclusion, I should say, as well.
Okay, so it's not just about women.
It's about inclusion.
But if you see the problem of women around the world, so what do you think that's the biggest problem faced by women right now that we should do something to improve?
So I think we're always trying to find what is the one problem. So, and what is the solution, and what are the drivers of inequality, for example. I actually think it's quite complex and it's different in different contexts. But it basically comes down to women feeling not being economically empowered, women not having a role in decision making, and women not feeling safe and secure. And if you're going to deal with issues around inequality, you actually have to have a solution that deals with all three aspects of that. For example, if you're going to have more women come into a marketplace to sell their goods, they have to feel safe. So you need lighting, you need toilets, to be frank. You need women's toilets. You also need them to be involved in the decision making around that marketplace so that they feel empowered, so they're not given the bad stands at the back. So I think, that's a very sort of small example, but you can actually take that up to sort of the highest level, that we've got decision making, economic empowerment and safety and security. And women will feel those issues at in different degrees, in different circumstances, and often in crisis situations, those things are most felt.
Okay, and as being a woman ambassador to Indonesia, is there any difference how you will work in Indonesia, or it's just continue with whatever the program here?
I think that everyone brings their own self, and that's the most important thing. And we talk in our ministry and across the Australian civil service about bringing your whole self to work, like bringing who you are, your authentic self to work. I don't play golf. I can't pretend to go and play golf. I have to do, one of the things that I am interested in, I have to bring that to my job to be authentic. So you'll always bring a part of yourself and a part of those sorts of interests. And look, some things, whether it's in Australia or Indonesia, senior women will always find what I would call sort of gendered contexts that you just have to deal with. The older I get, the more likely I am to call it out and to say, hang on, actually that's not how it works. You've got to include more women in this. Or hang on, this delegation, where's the women in this delegation? Or actually, so I'm more likely to kind of say those things than perhaps when I was a bit younger, because actually it matters to have women included and not just men on panels, or who, when I look at who my younger staff might be who accompany me, actually it's not just the men. We give everyone a chance, but those sorts of things. So
there's a lot of protest right now if we see like a seminar or webinar and it's like all male panel and there's like, okay, so we have to remind them that we cannot do this anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then talking about the cooperation between Indonesia and Australia, that despite many platforms for cooperation, we have a lot, right? CPA, CSP, and that's a lot. Still, the annual leaders meeting, that's a lot of things. But several experts see still the partnership between the two nations, especially in the economic sector, fails to reach its full potential. What do you think about that?
So I disagree. I actually think that the relationship has gone from strength to strength. But you mentioned two very important things. We have some very strong architecture in the relationship, the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership and the ISEPA that have been put in place in the last couple of years. And I think those pieces of architecture, which sounds like a very diplomatic term, but it's an agreement that we will do things together. I think that has really strengthened our relationship, and particularly during the pandemic. It's given us a focus to move forward. We haven't been able to do all of the things that we might want to do because borders have closed, but we've kept going. We've kept doing our cooperation on maritime. We've kept doing our cooperation on CT.
So the implementation
so the implementation continues. I think in the economic space, there's more room to grow. I think that's right. I think that when we look at the potential, it hasn't been fulfilled. But I have a sense of real enthusiasm, and maybe it's because of the pandemic actually, where people look at
2 years.
What are the opportunities? How do we do our business differently? But I think I see Australian investors looking here in different fields, in green energy, in health. There's a big perspective of investment, joint venture in West Java, building 24 hospitals. Bukalapak has just opened an IT hub in Melbourne, in Victoria. So I see a lot of interest in investment on both sides, and I think that the IASEPA has had a real head-turning effect in both places to go, oh, actually, maybe we take each other for granted. Maybe we can do more than just sell each other things, commodities. What more can we do? So Monash University has opened a campus here. It's the first foreign campus in Jakarta.
Right. It's already a couple of years, right?
It only opened just last year. They actually only just opened. So I think that is part of the economic engagement too. So I think there's a lot of room to really lift not just Australian investment, not just straight selling each other goods, but the economic engagement. So you've got whole ecosystems where you've got a big Australian investment and then vocational training and then pull through for other companies. So that's what I can see potentially on the horizon. I think one difficulty through this period where we haven't, been able to achieve the things that we would have wanted, but now we're almost there, is because the borders have been closed. So
just started.
Yeah, so we're open, we're ready, and Indonesia is moving to shorten the quarantine period, and you can see that we're moving to a place where the borders are going to be. I was out at the airport the other day farewelling a Garuda flight, which was the first after our borders. There's a flight arriving in Bali tomorrow, I think, on Garuda. So I can see that the borders are reopening, and what that means is that we can start the thing that's so valuable to the relationship, which is the exchange of people. So 1.3 million Australians, we're a country of 27 million, visit Indonesia every year. 1.3 million. That's a lot of people who come to, and a significant number of Indonesian students visit Australia, study in Australia. But also under the IASEPA, there's quite a few opportunities for mobility, to do sort of internships for companies to move people, to get a business experience.
So it's more like people to people links.
So I think that part. So I would say that our goods, our trading goods is pretty stable. Our investment is growing. I think there's more room in goods. Services hasn't been so. Our services trade, which is quite important to both of us, tourism and education, has been very dampened through the pandemic. But I think we're going to see that really come back. And talking to people both in Australia and Indonesia, I think after the pandemic, people are going to be looking to travel to countries that are nearby. They don't want to take the risk when they're planning their holiday to go too far away. But something that's not too... They want to go somewhere different because they haven't been able to travel for so long. But they want to go somewhere nearby. And I think that's good for both of us. I think it's good for Australian tourists coming to Indonesia and Indonesia tourists going to Australia.
So in the economic sector, we are in the right track.
I think absolutely. I think we're on the right track. We've also, to support IASEPA, produced a blueprint for Australian companies, which opens up to them the sorts of areas of collaboration that they might want to look at, that we see that are prospective. And then new areas like health and aged care, digital, food and sort of agri-business, green, energy transition.
Is it developed like just recently, or it's already a long time ago?
The blueprint was launched last year. So our trade minister came to Indonesia towards the end of last year, in the last quarter of last year, for a meeting with his Indonesian counterpart. Actually, it's quite interesting. So through this period of the pandemic, the Indonesian ministers and Australian ministers in the economic sphere in particular have had a lot of meetings and collaborations, visits. We've also had a CEO roundtable because we think that one of the ways for businesses to understand the opportunities is for CEOs to talk to CEOs, Indonesian CEOs talking to Australian CEOs. I think also there's a greater understanding of the sophistication of the Indonesian market. I mean, it's a huge market, 270 million people, but it's the digital, I'm always kind of, when people come to visit, I would say, look at what you can do. Look what I can order. Look, and it comes straight away. So I think people I talked about Bukalapak doing the IT hub. I think there's a lot of potential collaboration. Yesterday, I was very pleased to hear at this residence, Monash University and Traveloka signed an MOU to do some more work in the digital space. So I can see there's a momentum growing in new areas of interest.
But is there any special focus on the cooperation of this?
In the economic space?
In the economic,
so I think that I think health and aged care, education in the broader sense, in a more collaborative sense, digital, green energy and energy transition are areas that very much stand out as having real potential and a commitment on both sides.
What about in the defense and security? It's also in the maritime, of course. We
exactly.
have the border, the sea border.
So
what about the cooperation on this sector?
So we've had a long-standing cooperation in this space. We share one of the longest maritime boundaries,
and sometimes creates a tension.
I think it's actually much more of a positive sort of collaboration that we work together really closely in those spaces, not only in practical cooperation but also in the training and capacity building. Once again, I think that we come to these relationships and you can choose almost any area that we work on as governments, and there will be a collaboration and cooperation between Australia and Indonesia. Yesterday we had a launch of we're working on plastics together. I mean, there's so many just collaborations, but in the defence and maritime space quite a lot. Indonesia continues to be our first, and I think Indonesia the same, primary counter-terrorism partner, and we work incredibly closely, not only through regionally with JCLEC in Semarang, but also bilaterally. We had our Minister for Home Affairs visit at the end of last year December, last week of December, for the Ministerial Council on Law and Security meetings. That's also an annual meeting that goes ahead. Recently, not in that sphere, but in other spheres, we've had the Minister for Agriculture visit. So we've had a lot of ministers because they know that there's so much going on together between the two countries. That's quite practical and quite tangible. That actually makes a difference to people's lives.
Okay, it's because sometimes there's a tense about the asylum seekers that's crossing to Australia, or the Indonesian fishers that got this fish in the Australian sea, right? Sometimes it's create the tense, but it's really never bother the cooperation between the two countries.
And we're both, Australia and Indonesia are the co-chairs of the Bali process, and we work, and this year's the 20th anniversary of the Bali process. So I think across issues to do with trafficking and smuggling, we work very well regionally on those issues.
Oh, okay.
Selamat datang di Politeknik Tempo, kampus vokasi yang siap menjadi lahan penyemayan ide dan gagasan baru untuk menjawab tantangan di era 4.0. Fasilitas belajar ditunjang sistem Smart Campus dengan pembelajaran serba digital, membuat perkuliahan lebih mudah dan menyenangkan.
Kampus terintegrasi dengan industri media dan komunitas startup sehingga mahasiswa langsung berinteraksi dengan dunia kerja dan dunia usaha sejak dini. 3 program studi unggulan Politeknik Tempo: Desain Media, Produksi Media, Manajemen Pemasaran Internasional.
Sistem blended learning dan kampus merdeka dengan materi belajar 60% praktik, menjadikan lulusan Politeknik Tempo sebagai sarjana terapan siap kerja.
Sebagai penyelenggara pendidikan, Tempo Media Group berpengalaman selama 50 tahun di industri media dengan reputasi tinggi. Mari raih masa depan gemilang bersama Politeknik Tempo.
If we're talking about relationships so far, it's like you said, in the right track, but still, I'm sure there is a obstacle. So,
do you know
what do you know? Or there is no obstacle. So,
I think
also no obstacle, no challenge.
It's not that there's no challenge. I mean, of course, because we are both, we're countries that we're neighbours. But I can honestly say the relationship just hasn't been in such a good place, and that I think both of us know that we need to work together even more closely to ensure that we recover from the pandemic. I think on both sides, the commitment of both governments is and the focus is recovery from the pandemic, not only for our own economies but also for the region. And it is true that the world is it's more complex and it's more difficult, and it requires more conversations and you can't take things for granted, you need to have more conversations. Just going back to something actually I didn't mention at the beginning about Australia and Indonesia and our cooperation when we talk about gender is because we have 2 women foreign ministers.
Oh yeah.
Who have a really great relationship as well, and they talk to each other regularly. And actually our Minister for Foreign Affairs is also our Minister for Women, and she also has a relationship with her counterpart here, her other counterpart, who's the Minister for Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Ibu Menteri Bintang. So I just jump in there to say that actually we've got 2 women leading our foreign policy.
So it's really in the highest position for them.
and they work together, really well. So when you say about the challenges, what I would say are, and I mentioned them already, is that the challenge is for us both to recover economically. I think we need to really work hard to make sure we have those people-to-people links, because over the last couple of years, with the borders closed and difficulty travelling, that's been difficult for people. So while ministers have been able to come, we haven't seen as many young people being able to meet each other, and I think that as borders open and we have some more of those, the young Muslim exchange or the editors are exchange or the scholarship students who've started to arrive in Australia and the tourists, those things, at the end of the day, it's the people-to-people relationships that really underpin understanding of each other and really underpin the relationship. So I think that's going to be challenging for us to sort of build that back in. But both governments are also really committed to it.
But do you think that we still can improve this people-to-people links or in the cooperation in culture or social sector?
I think
education.
So it's one of the pillars. It is one of the pillars under the comprehensive strategic partnership, and I think it's one of the pillars that, as I said, has been most impacted by the border closures. I think there's always more we can do. Universities here and in Australia work really collaboratively together, doing all sorts of things. And actually, the pandemic has made them connect a little bit more in ways that we haven't online, in a way that we haven't. I met some university students in Bali, Balinese Indonesian university students who were actually doing a course of study from a university in Australia, but they were doing it there, but engaging, collaborating with their peers from an Australian university. I don't think that we would have done that before the pandemic in the same way. We would think always of getting on a plane and going somewhere, and I think we've got a bit more of a cooperation going there now through using. We can't rely on online, but I think online gives us some more opportunities to do things in that space, in the sort of people-to-people link.
Also, there is like Balai Bahasa Indonesia, right, in Australia. Do you think that's really improved the relationship?
So I think the study of Indonesian is really important in Australia. I think we have seen that the numbers of Australians studying Bahasa is not as high as it was before.
Before, yeah, right.
But it's not because people are not, it's a more competition. So
I
there's more
went
competition.
to elementary school
Yeah.
in Australia at that
Yeah.
time when the student learn about the Indonesian
Yeah, yeah.
language. So I don't know right now.
Lots of kids still learn in primary school and high school Indonesian. Maybe not as many in the past, but that's because there's also children learning Mandarin and Korean and Spanish. So there's a little
Japan
bit
at the time,
in
that's
Japanese,
quite big,
yeah,
yeah.
Japanese.
Japanese.
So that's something that I think that we know the importance of people speaking Indonesian and learning Indonesian in Australia as well.
And what does Australia expect from Indonesia's G20 presidency with focus of recover together, recover stronger? And what could be done together in this Indonesia's presidency? I mean, it's like everyone can take.
Yeah, exactly.
advantage.
Lots, I think.
Okay.
So Australia's really, really supportive of Indonesia's G20 presidency. We think it's great that Indonesia is chairing this year. And the areas that Indonesia's focused on, we actually really share those as priority. We talked about digital and how do you transition to digital, including online safety. It's quite important for us. How do you maintain online safety? Energy transition and what that actually means, and whether there's sort of potential also investments and things in that area that we can do, but also sort of the recovery from the pandemic, not only in a sort of health, not only in an economic way, but also what does it mean for sort of vaccines and access to vaccines going forward. So we are very similar minded with Indonesia and working really closely with Indonesia and achieving a great G20 year. It was, so we had the G20 finance. Indonesia obviously hosted the G20 finance ministers meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I was so pleased that our treasurer, who's our minister for finance, actually was able to come. It's in the middle of a very not difficult, but he's in the middle of finalising the budget, which comes out at the end of this month. So it's his it's a very busy time, but he really it was really important for him to attend in person. Despite the Omicron. So I think that we're really keen to walk with and work with Indonesia to achieve the goals of the G20.
Right. What kind of relationship of the two nations, Indonesia and Australia, that you hope to achieve when you finish your assignment here?
So
I don't know. It's like 3 years, 3.5 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably it will be longer.
So I guess in a way, I just sort of to reiterate those points that we've touched on. I'd like it to be stronger, broader, deeper, more resilient, more balanced, based on greater economic engagement. Really taking advantage of IA-SEPA and getting investors, in both countries really focused on the opportunities. I think there's some real, as I said, enthusiasm for that, and I think we can really achieve that. So I'd really like to see that. I'd like, and I've touched on this as well, also for us to see that rebuilding of the people-to-people links as the borders reopen. So a stronger, more resilient, more understanding of each other. I think we're in a very good place. But that friendship that we have, I suppose it's probably worth making the point that Australia sees Indonesia also as a leader in the region. I mean, it's an important relationship for us, but we also see Indonesia as a leader in the region. We see it as a place of great economic potential, and we also see it as a sort of the strategic importance of Indonesia. So when we think of those things, that's what we think about in terms of what the relationship we want going in an increasingly complex world. To be frank,
Yeah, especially with the current situation, it's quite complicated. Before we close this program, do you have still any important things to say?
So in terms of where we started, it's
in the relationship between Australia and Indonesia, or also on the women issue.
Yeah. So I suppose we're on the eve of International Women's Day. That I do think it's still, sometimes people say, but aren't we finished yet? Don't we have women leaders? Haven't we solved the issue of gender equality? You know, we have women foreign ministers and we have women ambassadors. Aren't we done? Aren't we done? We actually did a report.
Not yet.
Yeah, we did a report even in our own ministry, because the first question lots of people said, but aren't we done yet? Aren't we? We've got a woman minister, we've got a woman. And I don't think that we're done yet. And I think that it's important that people have senior positions, but we need to think about gender equality across the whole spectrum of society. And women still, in Australia and Indonesia and across the world, do not feel economically and are not economically engaged, that they are not able to make decisions about their own futures, their own bodies, their own children, and that they're also not, don't feel safe. Whether it's in Australia or, you know, the levels of violence against women are still heavy. So on International Women's Day, we should celebrate the achievements of women, but we need to also mark and think about how far we all still have to go. So it's one of those days, like celebrate, but there's some tough things that we all need to do together. And I'm so glad that Indonesia and Australia share a focus on achieving gender equality and working together regionally, internationally, and also bilaterally on those issues. In terms of the relationship more broadly, I do think that we have a really strong relationship, that we do work together really well across a range of areas. I always say an example of, if you ever want to kind of really understand the depth of our kind of engagement, we have someone from the National Library who works in our embassy, who collects Indonesian books, and we have one of the largest Indonesian collections. It matters to us that we have that. It matters to us that we know about Indonesia and young people know about Indonesia. So I do think there's a lot more we can do in the economic space. I think there's impetus and enthusiasm, and I'm really looking forward to being here to watch that happen over the next couple of years.
Ibu Penny, thank you for this insightful conversation. And sadly, we have to end to this program. Once again, it's an honor to have you here, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day. Viewers, thank you for watching us. I'm Purwani Dia Prabandari. You can watch the next Tempo Talks in the following months with another interesting topic and prominent guest. Good day.